Welcome to episode 1.5 of Kickstarted Gaming. Today we'll be looking at the Hyper Sentinel USB Collector's Edition cassette, which, as the title implies, is a secondary product received as part of the Droid Assault Collector's Edition Kickstarter. If you're interested in some more context, you should watch that video first. In any event, this is going to be a significantly shorter one than the Droid Assault video because, unfortunately, everything I said in that video about the quality still applies. That said, let's talk about the product a bit. This is a USB drive, stylized to look like an old school game on cassette. The game this time being Hyper Sentinel, developed by 45Six Pixel and published by Huey Games. Hyper Sentinel is an arcadey shoot-'em-up released in May of 2018 and is currently $15 on Steam at time of writing. The cassette also contains some bonus content in the way of indie game demos, an Andrew Hewson archive, and some bonus content related to Hyper Sentinel. So let's talk about my pledge, so to speak. I purchased this cassette via CrowdAux as an add-on to the Droid Assault Kickstarter. The cassette itself was £20 British or $24, and I paid around £8 shipping or $10. So all in all, this additional cassette cost me $34. Regarding the timeline, I purchased the cassette via CrowdAux on June 4th, 2019, and then I received it July 26th. Now let's get into the cassette itself. As I mentioned earlier, pretty much everything I said in my Droid Assault video applies here, but to summarize, there's a thumb drive that's sandwiched between two pieces of plastic designed to look like a cassette. Each side of the cassette has some custom artwork related to the game. It all comes in a relatively standard cassette case with custom designed artwork on the front and the spine and a game description on the back. The inside of the insert is an ad. And what do I think about the physical product? Again, same as before. It's a neat idea but poorly executed. The decal on the cassette is still misaligned. I'm worried the thumb drive will break again. And the inside of the cassette is still a goddamned ad. Still insulting and still a dick move. Now, onto the digital contents. This is where the differences actually start. Kind of. We still have the game itself, and we still have some bonus content, but this time we also have an ad/discount code for Andrew Hewson's book. Moving to the special features, we have the same Andrew Hewson archive, slightly different game demos, and then a handful of special features for Hyper Sentinel. And looking at the game folder itself, we're given a Steam installer this time because the game isn't DRM free. They just shipped a Steam key with the box. Last time we looked at the game first, so this time let's take a look at the special features. First, we have the Hyper Sentinel special features, which includes 30 pieces of Hyper Sentinel art, which is pretty neat. Concept art is always a good addition to my book. Second, we have a soundtrack, which is the exact same soundtrack from the Droid Assault cassette, which as a standalone product would be fine, but I already received this soundtrack with the Droid Assault cassette, so I guess from a complete game aspect though, it's still a nice addition. Third is a making of PDF that comes in at a whopping 40 pages. Written by Jonathan Port of 456 Pixel, this document details the process of making Hyper Sentinel from inception to publishing, with editorial notes from Rob Hewson of Huey Games. And this is a pretty awesome behind the scenes piece. I think someone pulling back the curtain of an industry a lot of people don't know much about, like indie game development, is fantastic. And the fact that this is a detailed, thorough piece from the perspective of the game's creator versus, let's say, a piece by a game journalist, I think that makes it all the cooler. And last, we have a strategy guide for the game that's actually just a manual. I appreciate its inclusion, but I wish they hadn't gotten my hopes up and just, called it a game manual. All in all, the bonus features for Hyper Sentinel are much better than those on the Droid Assault cassette. It's hard to believe that this was actually their first cassette, considering it seems to be a lot higher quality than the Droid Assault one. Next, we'll talk about the game demos. This time around we have 6 demos, 2 being repeats from the Droid Assault cassette. Those are OA and The Mystery of Woolly Mountain. And then we have 4 new to me demos, Mau Mau Castle, Spiders from Mars, Retroids, and Thrunt XL. We'll briefly take a look at each one, starting from the bottom with Thrunt XL. And as soon as we open the folder, we have a problem. The game itself is an installer instead of being a standalone executable. I really don't enjoy having to install something from a small publisher I know nothing about. But I went ahead and did it anyways, so yeah. After playing it though, I'm actually really glad they included it. This demo is better than pretty much all of the other ones that I played on the Droid Assault cassette. I do hope it's a later level though, since what they say should take 45 seconds to complete took me about 13 minutes. Next, we have Retroids. This is a top-down shooter where you pilot your ship freely, trying to take out and avoid enemies at the same time. I think this is a really good inclusion, not because it's a great game, I think it's a little above average, but because it's likely to appeal to people who are going to enjoy Hyper Sentinel. Third is Spiders from Mars, a kind of tribute to Space Invaders where you pilot your ship left to right, defending your houses from giant spiders that drop down from the sky. And it's actually super fun, and again, I think appropriate for the game it's bundled with. Then we have Mau Mau Castle, an auto-scroller where you, an elongated cat, have to navigate a number of waves passing through gates and avoiding obstacles. This is another retro-stylized game, and a pretty fun one at that. Again, I think it fits well with the theme of the cassette and is a good addition. And that covers it for the demos. I'm not sure how they did such a good job with these demos in comparison to the Droid Assault cassette. Seriously, this was their first attempt, and aside from the same physical issues, it has been far and away better. Moving on to the game, this time we'll cover it in more detail since there isn't already a better video by Total Biscuit floating around the internet. Hyper Sentinel is described as a face-melting, pixel-pumping arcade shoot-'em-up featuring awesome power-ups, epic boss battles, and spectacular effects at a blistering 60 FPS. And if we subtract the adjectives, that's pretty much what you get. An arcade shoot-'em-up that has power-ups and boss battles. To start out, this game can be played with a controller or keyboard and mouse. The controls, however, aren't remappable, which is a huge bummer. For controller, it tries to play a bit like a twin-stick shooter, but you can only shoot in one direction, so the right stick being shoot actually gets kind of annoying after a while. I would prefer ideally remappable buttons, but at the very least the ability to use the triggers to shoot. And just like the controls, the rest of the settings are also pretty sparse, with the only real options being the graphics modes, of which we have Standard, which is, standard, Vibrant, which seems to be a bit more saturated, CRT, which curves the screen some and adds some scan lines and removes a bit of color, Spectrum, which gives us a green scale mode, and C64, which is designed to look like a C64, emulating its palette. This is honestly one of the better features in the game, IMO. It doesn't add a ton other than place a filter over everything for the most part, but I think it's still pretty cool. Now that we've gone through the options, let's talk about the gameplay. In each level, you fly your ship, shooting two guns in the direction you're facing, left or right, and you also have the ability to change direction at will, giving you iframes whenever you do. Your objective, unfortunately, in every level is the same. Destroy all the ground objects, fight the boss, and then along the way there's enemies that fly at you, some of them carrying power-ups. I say unfortunately because it's literally the same gameplay in each and every level, on each and every difficulty, and in each and every game mode except for one. And speaking of game modes, there are quite a few. There are 3 game modes: arcade, survival, and bosses, and they're just what you would expect. Arcade mode is just the story mode, survival, you have to survive as long as you can, and bosses is just a boss rush mode. Please, try saying that 5 times fast. Additionally, there are 3 difficulties: normal, hard, and retro, making for 9 ways to play each and every level. Man, the segues are just writing themselves in this video. Now, let's touch on the difficulty. Normal is so easy, it's not really fun. With changing directions giving you iframes, you just flip-flop in front of what you want to shoot, and that's pretty much all there is to it. Hard is more of the same, though I did die a few times on one of the bosses, and retro didn't seem much harder than hard, though I only played through a couple levels. And I didn't even mention the power-ups yet. They make things laughably easy. To give an example, while I was recording footage of the different graphics modes, I accidentally picked up a rear-firing power-up. It completely destroyed all the ground units, with me just flying left to right trying to capture footage. I didn't even take damage doing it. So yeah, bottom line is that with the iframes and the power-ups, the game really becomes too easy. Here's where I would normally talk about the story, but there really isn't one. There's not even an intro set of credits that explains why you're attacking these other aliens in your ship that can become invincible at will. So yeah, no story here. Next, we'll talk about the graphics. Bottom line, I think they're okay. I think they do an okay job at being retro, but I really want some kind of depth to everything. It feels like it's just tiles sitting on top of tiles, and it just looks kind of blah. I also think the standard color palette isn't great, but at least that part can be changed with one of the graphics modes, and that's what makes these graphics passable, the ability to change it up whenever you want. Moving on, when I review games, I like to look for what I call the X factor, something that makes the game more than the sum of its parts, something I think would fundamentally change the game for the worse if it were missing. Unfortunately, Hyper Sentinel never had that to begin with, except for maybe if you're really hard up for a game in this art style. Overall, I don't think this game is all that fun, or remarkable in any way. There's only 12 levels, and the replayability with the different game modes and difficulties is pretty eh. I think if this was a more traditional twin-stick shooter, it would be a lot more fun, or even if they added the ability to shoot in different directions. Even if it was just like 30 degrees left or right, I think that would make a difference. Even smaller things like remappable keys would help make this game better, but there's just so much missing, especially considering this is a $15 Steam game. Normally I have this whole checklist I like to show at the end of a game review, but since this is a review inside another review, I'll just leave you with my rating scale. So should you play this game? On a scale of hell no to please play before you die, it's definitely a no from me, which is just above a hell no. Now that my probably too long game review is over, let's get back to the cassette and talk about if I think it's worth it or not. Simply put, no. In my opinion, compared to the Droid Assault cassette, you're getting a worse game with much better special features for $7 less, 34 versus 41. And all the issues I had with the physical product still stand. The decal, cheap feeling, and the freaking ads. God, I hate ads. So yeah, this cassette didn't break yet like Droid Assault, so we aren't going to give it 2 thumbs down, but I think it still deserves 1. So this is me after recording my original narration. I was doing a little bit more research into Hyper Sentinel, trying to read reviews and stuff, and I found a bunch of mentions for a game called Uridium, which was originally a Commodore 64 game released in 1986, so over 30 years ago at this point. And it's literally Hyper Sentinel. Like, well, Hyper Sentinel is Uridium. It's pretty much just a clone, like an updated clone for it. And I think it looks worse, like not visually obviously, but I think the gameplay in Uridium looks better than Hyper Sentinel, which is pretty hilarious considering it's being called like a spiritual successor, or at least something to scratch that itch. And considering that Uridium was released for the Wii Virtual Console in 2008, which wasn't that long ago, you might as well just go play that instead. Seriously, it looks like a much better game, and I don't know why you would want to play Hyper Sentinel instead of that. I hope you enjoyed this look at the Hyper Sentinel USB Collector's Edition cassette, and if you did, maybe give it a like and hit subscribe. I'll have more Kickstarted Gaming videos in the future as more games roll in. And unfortunately, I do not have a teardown for you this time, but if you do want to see what the cassette looks like on the inside, there is one at the end of the Droid Assault video.